Thank you. Well, last week we began our study of Genesis chapter 6, dealing with the sons of God coming and marrying the daughters of men. And this has been a passage of conflict and controversy for quite some time. But we looked last week, and I just don't see how you can look at this passage of Scripture any other way than to come to the conclusion that the sons of God were angelic beings. The title, the sons of God, is given to beings that were a special creation. We as New Testament Christians are children of God. And we've talked about the difference between a child of God and a son of God. Adam was called a son of God in the genealogy of Jesus Christ in Luke chapter 3. Everyone was a son of his father, except when you get down to Adam, it says he was a son of God. Adam was a special creation by God, created to have the dominion over the earth. Sonship implies rulership. Only sons rule in God's kingdom. Angels are sons of God. And this may be a hard pill to swallow, but Satan is a son of God. Some people have a hard time...
Black sheep of the family.
Yeah. Some people have a hard time realizing that. But when in Job, where we see the sons of God are congregating at the congregation of the mount before God in the presence of God, it says Satan was there among them as an equal.
How do we separate Jesus, the only Son of God?
He's the only begotten.
Begotten.
He's the only begotten Son of God.
So, created Son and begotten Son.
Look at Hebrews chapter 1 real quick. Yeah, in John 3:16, you have to be very careful. Some of the newer translations says, "For God so loved the world, He gave His only Son." And that's an incorrect translation. God has many sons. But the correct translation is, "For God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son."
Right.
Hebrews chapter 1, if I can find it. This is a passage dealing with Jesus being so, he's not an angel.
Yeah,
he's not equal to the angel.
It's just the Son superior to angels.
Right. Verse 4 says, "Being made so much better than the angels, as he has by inheritance obtained a more excellent name than they. For unto which of the angels has he said at any time, You are my son, this day have I begotten you. And again, I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son." So the difference between Jesus and the angels is he is a begotten son. Now, this isn't part of the study, but has the Son always existed?
In the beginning was the Word. The Word was...
He always didn't exist as the Son. He's always existed.
But not as a Son.
In the beginning was the Word. The original Trinity was the Father, the Word, and the Spirit.
Right.
But the Word became flesh.
This
day I have begotten you, and you became my Son. And as far as I can tell, He forever will exist as the Son. But He did that for the purpose of redeeming mankind. So, Jesus is a son of God. Satan is a son of God. The difference is Jesus is God's only begotten Son. Back to Genesis 6. Let's see where we're at. Last week we looked at several passages dealing with the sons of God and showing who they are, and we've come to the conclusion they are angelic beings. We looked at several passages in the New Testament in 2 Peter and in Jude where it deals with the angels that sin. God has put them in everlasting chains in prison, and in 2 Peter it says that He's got them in a place called Tartarus. And some translations translate that as hell. And one of these days we're going to do a study on the different hells that are mentioned in the Bible. Again, all we, just like there's three heavens, all we think there's heaven and hell, and that we don't really stop and think about what's really out there. Well, when we talk about hell, what are we talking about? There's Hades, there's Gehenna, there's Tartarus, there's the lake of fire, and all of those things are different places, and they serve different purposes. So these angels that sinned are being held in bondage in Tartarus, which, according to mythology, and this you're not going to find this in the scriptures anywhere. There was a passage that said that Tartarus is far beneath the earth as earth is beneath the heaven. So some believe that Tartarus is in the center of the earth somewhere. And let me find a verse real quick. Look, turn to the Revelation. This is an interesting. If I can find it, I didn't look this up before I. Chapter 9. We read about the bottomless pit in the book of the Revelation. I personally believe that the bottomless pit and this place called Tartarus are the same thing. If you look at chapter 9, verse 1, it says, "The fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven to the earth, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke and of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads." I personally believe that those locusts that are coming out of this bottomless pit are the same angels that we're reading about in Genesis 6 that God's locked down in prison down in the Tartarus.
And that's where Jesus went to preach, wasn't it?
Right. It says in 1 Peter, let me make sure I'm reading right. We looked at it last week. Yeah, 1 Peter chapter 3. Verse 18, it says, "Christ also has suffered for the sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit, by which also he went and preached to the spirits in prison, which sometimes were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, wherein a few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water." So after Jesus was resurrected from the grave, he actually went to this prison. And he preached to those angels that sinned. And that passage of Scripture bothered me for a couple years. It really bothered me because I've heard, and maybe some of you have heard, that when Jesus died on the cross, he went to Hades, which they teach that before the resurrection, Hades was split into two. There was the fiery torment side and there was the paradise side. And they teach that when Jesus died, he went to Hades, and he preached to the Old Testament saints his death and resurrection, and they believed on him, and when he resurrected, he took all the Old Testament saints out of Hades up into heaven. And they get that from this passage of Scripture, which is just can't be done, because he's preaching to the spirits that were disobedient in the days of Noah. So it's a misinterpretation. Whether or not Jesus talked to the people in paradise when he went to Hades or not, the Bible just doesn't say. But this is not the passage of Scripture to prove he did that. And it really bothered me when I came across this passage, because why in the world would Jesus go preach to a bunch of angels that left their